We have enough for okay, we have enough for a quorum, so let me read the opening. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. Okay, where's my agenda? I know I got one here somewhere. There we go. Okay, as I said, we have a quorum. I have 8 at this point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2 people have informed me that they will not be here. Stephanie Lowenhow and Brian Mason. So we may pick up a couple of late people. Well, welcome to our June meeting. I want to thank Cameron for bringing our guest presenters and also for helping me put the agenda together. And Carolyn, I think for Carolyn, that you helped type up the agenda and put it out, I believe. But anyway, welcome. My wife will kill that in a minute. Sorry about that. There she goes. Any general announcements or comments before I get to adoption of the draft minutes? Okay, can we have a motion to adopt the draft minutes that LJ prepared for us at our last meeting?
So moved.
Okay, Olivia, thank you. Second. The only thing that I had, LJ, was the meeting needs to have a heading with Pantops CAC meeting May 24th, 2021. Okay, thank you, LJ, for doing the minutes for us.
Yep, no problem. We'll make that change, and I've got minutes for today covered as well. And just this is my last meeting, so my last minutes to submit to everyone.
I certainly appreciate your service, LJ, and also working on the committee with you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Amen.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure. Have enjoyed it. Home computer doesn't have a camera, otherwise I'd see you all this evening, so apologies for that.
Great, LJ. I guess I'll run into you at Grit.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Ida Lee, were you trying to?
Yes, I have one correction on the minutes. My last name has 2 T's in it.
How many times do we have to correct that? Anyway,
All
thank
the
you,
time.
Ida Lee. I'm sure you run into that all the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments or corrections? Okay, I'll move on to item 3, presentation on the Rivanna River Corridor Plan. I'll turn that over to Cameron at this point to introduce your personnel.
Thanks, Dick. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Tonight, we have Tim Padalino, who is with the county's Parks and Recreation Department. We also have Liz Russell, who is with the Thomas Jefferson Foundation. And tonight, they're going to be giving us a presentation sort of as a follow-up to what we talked about last month, but also some new information about feasibility study that's currently underway to look at extending the Old Mills Trail. Tim has some other things he's going to talk about as well related to parks and green systems along the Rivanna River, particularly that near the Pantops area. But I guess now I will turn it over to Tim if you'd like to begin your presentation.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Cameron and Dick and everybody. It's great to be here. Just bear with me for a moment while I get my presentation shared. switch screens. Okay, can everybody see those slides and hear me okay?
Yes.
It comes through fine.
Great, thanks a lot. So yeah, as Cameron said, my name is Tim. I think we've worked together a number of times in the past, but I'm the county's Chief of Parks Planning. Happy to be here tonight and provide more information. And also, as Cameron said, we've got Miss Liz Russell with us, Monticello's Assistant Director for Sustainability and Safety. Liz is also an appointed member of Albemarle County's Historic Preservation Committee, and I'm pretty sure she came straight from that monthly meeting to this meeting tonight. Liz graciously offered to join us and provide some good detailed info on the cultural heritage and the historic resources along this section of the Rivanna as it pertains to Greenway planning. So for this presentation tonight, I want to make sure that we don't only talk about the Greenway Trail being planned, but preface that with some good background context to put it, to provide texture and context. And there's quite a bit of information. So I think both Liz and I are going to move somewhat rapidly, knowing that we can always go back at the end of this presentation and have some good discussion and questions and answers at the end. So I wanted to start in terms of context, just providing some departmental info about Albemarle County Parks and Rec. This is our vision and mission statement. And I just am sharing this to emphasize that our department's efforts to serve the public are done with a dual focus on two overarching objectives, which are outdoor recreation and environmental stewardship, plus operating and managing other rec programs and classes and sports leagues. But in terms of parks and greenways, it's really about outdoor recreation and environmental stewardship. And I know the agenda item title and the main purpose for this presentation is mostly focused on the feasibility study, which provided detailed analysis and recommendations for the future development of the Old Mills Trail extension. And this study, completed in 2020 by Land Planning and Design Associates, or LPDA, provides a detailed study of approximately 4 miles of an extension. And I do want to clarify that currently there is an existing section of the Old Mills Trail, as I think most viewers and attendees know. It's approximately 2.5 miles in length between Dardentow Park on the upstream section and the I-64 bridges at the downstream, the current ending of the trail. So the planned extension would actually go downstream from the bridges, the I-64 bridges, downstream to Milton along a fairly wild and very historic section of the scenic Rivanna River. So another context or another detail I want to share before we get into the study is the fact that the Old Mills Trail is part of the Rivanna Greenway, but the Rivanna Greenway itself is actually part of the Greenways and Blueways program. So it's more than just a new trail. So yes, it will be about increasing public opportunities for hiking, jogging, pedaling, and other land-based outdoor recreation, but also increasing opportunities for safe and convenient access to the river and just supporting enjoyable water recreation. So for example, the vision for the Rivanna Greenway and Blueway includes future development of an expanded, improved public landing and river access spot at Milton, as well as some type of a new trailhead facility at Milton that could be used for both river recreation users and trail users. But actually, the Greenways and Blueways program is more than just playing outside. It's more than just outdoor recreation on land and water. It's also about providing opportunities for contact with nature and wildlife observation. It's about supporting opportunities for environmental education and stewardship activities. It's about historic preservation and interpretation, and other programs and resources for highlighting our local natural heritage and cultural heritage. So in addition to hiking and running and pedaling and paddling and fishing, county parks and county greenways can and should be places where our community's story can be told, both the story of the land and the story of the people. And in these ways, county parks and county greenways represent a unique opportunity and asset to establish and enhance meaningful connections to our local sense of place. So some more context, this trail extension is part of a larger Greenway, which is part of a larger Greenway and Blueway program. But it's really even grounded more fully than that in terms of the Pantops master plan and the Albemarle County comprehensive plan. So you can see the excerpts here, and I'm sure this future parks and green systems plan looks familiar to the CAC members. This was completed in 2019. Now, the extension, barely fits onto this plan for Pantops, but I wanted to provide that for context in terms of the master plan. And then looking here at the county's Greenway plan for the development areas and showing an enlarged excerpt. In this pink rectangle is where the Old Mills Trail extension would be located. And I wanted to share this to demonstrate that really there's a Greenway plan from the South Fork of Rivanna Reservoir downstream through Places 29 development area, all the way through the Pantops development area, through part of the rural areas, and then continuing to the Village of Rivanna development area and beyond to the future Buck Island Creek Park. And honestly, the Rivanna Greenway is part of regional plans and even statewide plans. So just for a quick reference, I've included an excerpt from the Jefferson Area Bike and Ped Plan and also the Virginia Outdoors Plan, which includes what they call the Rivanna River Trail as a featured project for our region. So some additional context, we wanted to break down this section of the Rivanna Greenway in terms of its natural heritage, its cultural heritage and historic resources, and then some existing conditions before ultimately getting to the feasibility study highlights. So in terms of natural heritage, there's a lot that could be said, but this image demonstrates that the Rivanna is one of 3 conservation focus areas in our county. So you've got the Blue Ridge Mountains, what could be called the Batesville Mountains in the southwestern part of the county, and then the Rivanna itself. And I also wanted to emphasize that the Rivanna River is the first formally designated scenic river in the Commonwealth. And it's pretty easy to see why on a pretty spring day. And to provide some information about the cultural heritage and historic resources, I'm going to turn it over to Liz.
Thanks, Tim. And thank you for inviting me to speak tonight on behalf of Monticello. I have been working with the county for many years now in seeing this vision come to light, and the Greenway and Blueway Trail will pass through part of Jefferson and Thomas Jefferson Foundation owned land. And we're just so happy to be a part of helping to tell this important story and provide an amenity for residents like those in the Pantops area. Go ahead, Tim. So I'm going to take you to the best extent possible on a brief timeline of historical context as relates, as Tim said, to this area. So this is the John Smith map dating from 1612. It's kind of an iconic or very notable map because he annotated Native American names, locations, and I want to draw your attention to this is what we now call the Rivanna River, but you have the two sites here kind of bookended on where we are, the Monacan town of Montezuma Panawa, I think I'm saying that right, which was a town located at the crossing of the north bank of the South Fork of the Rivanna River, so upstream from Pantops off the Polo Grounds Road area. And then at the end of the Rivanna, emptying into the James River, was Rassawick at the confluence of the Rivanna and the James River. We know these rivers as the Rivanna and the James. We don't, unfortunately, know the names that the Monacan people would have used. But in short, Virginia has been inhabited for over 12,000 years. And specific to this area were the Monacan people. I think yes. Next is a slide of the of modern day Point of Fork. You can go to that, Tim. This is where I was saying the James and the Rivanna rivers meet in Fluvanna. Interestingly, in the 1750s, Thomas Jefferson describes a party of Indians, passing Indians, Native Americans, on his property near Monticello, visiting a burial mound. We think that would have been the site at Polo Grounds Road that he was passing by to visit that burial ground site. And this indicates that even at that time, the Monacan people knew that their ancestors were buried in the mounds and visited them to grieve. Jefferson later called for the excavation of this mound. And while he is known as the father of archaeology, it's important to also know that he desecrated a burial ground as well in doing that. If anyone is interested in more history around the Monacan people, there's a great website, monacannation.com, that talks in great depth about their history in this area. So go ahead, Tim. So this is an overview of Albemarle County in 1875. This is illustrating some features that were still extant on the landscape. And I'll point out Shadwell is noted. And then in the little cursive, you can see dams, canals, locks. You can see structures at Milton. I'm going to take you back in time in the coming slides, but I wanted to just give you a kind of overview of the context in which we're talking about. And I love these old maps because you can see people's names. You can see, Lego, Shadwell, Monticello, Charlottesville, and all the infrastructure that would have been used in addition to the railroad, the canals, the systems of transportation on the river. Next slide. Okay, and so here we are looking at the fields as indicated, as named, and sort of laid out by Jefferson, overlaid with some modern features. And this is a modern topography map. So if you're not familiar with reading topo lines, what's really distinct at the top of the map is I-64 carving its way through the landscape. But try to suspend that from because that was obviously a later feature, but the proposed Old Mill Trail would be passing along what are called the Oblong Field, the Square Field, Hickman's Field, South Field, Yard Field, East Field. So these are the plantations of Lego and Shadwell. And within this 5,000 acre plantation farm, there would have been tobacco and later wheat and corn and even clover being planted in a crop rotation. Jefferson was experimenting with crop rotation. And specifically that wheat would have been going towards his mill complex at Shadwell and being ground, sent down the river and sold, I think as far, grain was, going to England at that time. We know that enslaved and free people would have been laboring on these plantations, but also constructing the mills, canals, and involved in transporting goods up and down the river. Go ahead. Okay, so fascinating history on the Rivanna of the Rivanna Navigation Society. The Rivanna Navigation Society was established in 1805, and both Jefferson and this company of sort of civic-minded leaders were really interested in making the Rivanna navigable. Jefferson actually touts his successful campaign to make the Rivanna navigable in his run for Virginia Assembly. So it actually gave him, you know, the Rivanna River gave him the start to his political career in making it navigable. He did a lot of work, obviously, along his mill in constructing that and diverting water. But similarly, the Rivanna Navigation Society was heavily involved in improvements to the river to make it more navigable. And we have several eras of what's actually happening on the river. And, you know, it's just so fascinating that so much of that is lost, and part of, you know, what story we could tell in expanding this Greenway Blueway would be to illustrate and inform people what was on the landscape, what still remains, and, you know, context and how it was used. So just very briefly, you had the first stage of navigating the river in just clearing rocks and making sort of channels. And you can imagine these bateaus laboring upriver, laden, you know, or I suppose downriver, they'd be laden with hogsheads of tobacco. But this was pretty dangerous because these wing dams would be created to sort of funnel boats through, and they would slam against the sides and break. And so this was, as trade increased, this became inadequate. The Rivanna Navigation Company then invested in a series of what's called slackwater navigation. And this is the series of locks and dams you can kind of think of. And there's an illustration there of a stone lock at Union Mills. So the bateau goes in, the water rises, they continue along. And then finally in 1850, there's a transition on the river as far as Milton downstream. It never came upriver from Milton, but this was the canal and towpath system where a separate canal has been channeled adjacent to the river, and, you know, mules or horses are pulling boats up that canal. So that's just a very brief overview of the eras of construction. That really interesting engraving was at the confluence of the James River and Rivanna, where the James and Conoa Canal actually went over the Rivanna River. So boats were going over the Rivanna, which was flowing freely into the James. And that is no longer there. It was blown up, and I'm, you know, a little bit foreshadowing, blown up by the C&O Railroad. Go ahead, Tim. This is a mystery because I don't remember the order of the slides, so I'm a little bit as engrossed as you all. This is the 1850s engraving of the mill at Shadwell. So these next series of images show what was there, and you can see here the C&O Railroad. Ultimately, the river navigation succumbed to the railroad, and although the Rivanna Navigation Company, bless their hearts, kept pouring in money, the writing was on the wall with the railroad replacing navigation. So this is the 1850s. Go ahead to the next, Tim. I'm unsure of this year, likely, I don't know, I'm just gonna guess late 1800s. And I think, do we have any other pictures? Let's see what's on the next one. Oh, great. This sketch by Jefferson is a great historical evidence because although he did this for a lawsuit, kind of, I think he might have been involved with a lawsuit at one point with the Rivanna Navigation Company themselves. He illustrates, you know, in great detail what is at his site. You have the canal, the mill. He calls it the manufacturing mill. It was grinding wheat, locks, and then of course the Rivanna River. So that all aligns with. The only thing extant on the landscape now is the foundation of that manufacturing mill, which dates from the. Well, construction started in the early 1800s and it was completed by 1807. Also passing through this area is a very important transportation route. The three-notched road trace came. You know, you had a lot of things all going through this this area between the river, the railroad, the three-notched road, which later became 250. And this is just, I believe this is on or near the Shadwell property. Next, Tim. Another neat feature is that I showed you the map earlier with the railroads, the Peyton map from 1875. It identifies Auburn Farm. We know that there was a suspension bridge there was actually a depot at Shadwell that passed to Auburn Hill. Presumably people would have crossed this to get to that train depot. And there is, there's some iron rods and ties, and there's one on that rock that's in the river. I think this might be taken from the opposite side of the creek, but I have good reason to believe that that's the location of that suspension bridge. Go ahead, Tim. I don't know if we have anything else. Yeah, so though that's my very condensed history of the resources and the potential along the river. And again, happy to be with you. If you're interested in learning more, we have a great live stream recently that our archaeologist and another colleague at Monticello discuss more in depth agriculture and the plantation economy, as well as the mills on our website. Thank you very much.
Liz, thanks so much. That truly is fascinating. And to think about, what this river was like when it was being developed and used in its heyday. And then to think that a lot of these traces are still out there today of these remnants and ruins and sort of even a cultural landscape. It's very exciting. So thanks once again for providing all that info and for navigating my misordered slides.
I have a quick question. Are there any of the landmarks in this area now? Like, is there anything at Milton Hills, Shadwell? Any of the buildings are around?
So the ruins of the mill dating from 1807 do remain. And thank you for bringing that up, because that is one of the obviously archaeological features and treasures that the foundation is very vested in protecting. It's the corner there, and it kind of an outline, but we want to balance interpretive opportunity with also safety and preservation of the resource. So that will be something that we will want to work very closely with the county in appropriately designing a trail, right?
I don't know.
Great. Thanks for that question, Olivia. So yeah, transitioning from a look to the past, we want to make sure that there's a good overview of the existing conditions before getting to the summary of the feasibility study. So at the expense of sounding repetitive, I do want to re-emphasize that part of the Old Mills Trail is open. It's a tremendous trail. It's kind of running on the opposite bank of the Rivanna from the Rivanna Trail in Charlottesville. And it offers sort of a contrasting trail experience. There's more undulation, there's more natural surfaces and rock outcrops. And so, hope everybody avails themselves of that great existing open public trail. In contrast, there's a contrast that the Old Mills Trail extension downstream from Pantops is a planned future public amenity. So it's not constructed yet, it's not funded yet, although a narrow primitive trail does currently exist, but it's never officially been sanctioned and is not officially maintained and is not currently authorized for public use. Some easement acquisitions are still necessary before beginning final project design and funding requests and grant applications and everything that will come in the months and years ahead. And as you can see on this exhibit, there actually is an additional section of the Rivanna Greenway that is currently constructed and maintained by the county. And that's actually downstream from Milton here. It's the Glenmore section of the Rivanna Greenway. It's over 2 additional miles that currently exist. There is not currently any general public access, but obviously the hope is to stitch all of these sections together for one continuous greenway. Just wanted to point that out. So as far as the feasibility study, LPDA completed this last year, as I said. It was broken down into 2 halves. The first half was analysis, looking at opportunities and constraints. And the second half was a summary of proposed improvements. In terms of the analysis, some of the top level highlights are the fact that the Rivanna River is a dynamic, wild feature. It's got a floodway and a floodplain, and there are instances of erosion, and it changes over time here and there. Also, there's an active railroad. Buckingham Branch operates the rail on a CSX railbed. So in some cases, some rails with trails type of equipment or infrastructure could potentially be necessary. There are several tributaries to the Rivanna River, which today create nearly impassable obstacles. There's an active quarry at Luckstone, which includes blasting. And as we've talked about, there are unique and sensitive historic resources and remnants, which will require special management strategies. And so the feasibility study itself, the proposed improvements, are broken down across 5 sheets. I wanted to provide the vicinity map here at the beginning to show that we're working our way from Pantops downstream to Milton across these 5 sheets. And there's a fair amount of information on them. So what you might want to draw your attention to are the brown lines, which represent the planned Greenway trail. In some cases, it's a solid brown line that represents the main 6-foot wide crushed stone trail. There are some dashed or dotted brown lines, which represent opportunities to keep the existing narrow primitive trail as a complement to the wider, more gently graded Greenway trail. And then there are sections where there's a yellow glow or highlight, and that represents portions of the route that require easement acquisitions. Excuse me. So sheet 1, you can see here there's the existing Old Mills Trail ends, and there's going to need to be work with culverts and bridges in a couple different places along this first section in the vicinity of Interstate 64. There are some erosion issues, and there are some instances where the existing trail is very close to the riverbank, and so relocating it a little bit up the hill would be more sustainable and more durable over time. After you go under the highway bridges, you can see that there's the railroad corridor. So we need to do some work with Buckingham Branch and CSX to make sure that the final permissions are in place and they approve of an underpass structure to keep trail users safe. There's also a few instances where rerouting or relocating the trail is going to be advantageous to avoid sandy areas. Even in some cases, moving it a little bit closer to the riverbank. And this would continue downstream through Lego Farm. And there's some notes about, preserving and protecting the relics of the stone wall, probably associated with Three Notch Road, potentially. And some minor rerouting here to have a more sustainable alignment. And the construction of a bridge that would connect trail users from Lego Farm to South Lego Farm. And you can see this yellow glow indicating that this is not currently under county easement or county control. So we're working with Monticello on this with some increased coordination coming in the months ahead. And this is one of those first instances where there might be an opportunity to have sort of a braided trail system with a main Greenway trail and then a smaller single track trail to provide a variety of user experiences and to accommodate trail users of different skill levels or mobility types. Another bridge here to get from South Lego Farm closer to Shadwell Farm, which is shown here on sheet 3. And the trail will follow this bend in the river, and it gets very narrow here. So this is one of those instances where there might need to be some additional equipment to keep trail users safe from the active railroad line. Continuing downstream, LPDA identified a great opportunity for a small pocket park, just a little passive recreation area with an overlook, maybe some benches, just an opportunity to kind of be beside the river, observe wildlife, maybe take a break and rest partway along this section of the trail. And it's also proposed for an area right next to some historic bridge abutments with big, beautiful cut stone retaining walls and just nice historic details that are hard to come by these days, but a great existing historic resource here. The trail would continue downstream, again, in a potentially braided fashion here. Before both trails would sort of reunite and consolidate into one Greenway trail. And that's important to make sure that there aren't going to be trails right through the mill ruins. It's an issue as it stands today currently. And it's important to Monticello and to the county to make sure that trail users and Greenway visitors can see and learn about the mill ruins and other historic resources without impacting them. So we'd like to make sure that all trail users are brought up and away from the ruins and across this bridge before continuing along the downstream portions of the historic Shadwell Farm. And the next property downstream is Luckstone. And part of the arrangement and agreement between Luckstone and Albemarle County is to make sure that trail users can remain safe while passing through an active quarry. So that's going to include some gates, some signage, and some operational details to make sure that the trail and the gates will be closed along this section during any active blasting operations. So continuing downstream to sheet 5, this is the final sheet. You can see how the Greenway Trail would continue around this bend. You'd hit that second gate and second bridge at this part of the Luckstone property. And the Greenway would continue past that rope swing on that giant sycamore tree to the rapids here, where the river spills over a ledge and creates a really fun, exciting section of the river. There's some boulders and some rock outcrops that really create a pinch point, and there may need to be a section of boardwalk trail or some other creative design solutions to make sure Greenway users can get through. But that's another highlight of this trail for the natural heritage that's just really exciting and interesting at that point. And finally, the trail would cross Stone Robinson Elementary School property, and it's planned to come under North Milton Road, under the bridge there, and continue to the existing boat landing at Milton. So I do want to mention on this slide that there are some potential improvements or further development of the Rivanna Blueway facilities. And specifically, the opportunity exists potentially to expand and improve the facilities for the public landing and the boat launch itself at Milton, as well as potentially develop a trailhead at Milton to provide river access and also to support use of the Greenway Trail itself. And then I mentioned this earlier, but depending on easement acquisitions, there's a theoretical possibility of continuing downstream across the Clifton's property, building one more bridge, and thereby connecting to the existing Glenmore section of the Rivanna Greenway. So those two possibilities would add about three and a half additional miles downstream from North Milton Road.
Is the trail that goes by Stone Robinson, if you're looking at the front of the school, are we speaking at the very back end coming between, because the railroad is on one side of the back of the school and then it's Luckstone on the other side?
Mm-hmm.
Is the trail just adjacent to the school's property line?
It would cross perpendicular, from the frontage to the rear.
Okay.
And this is one of those sections where there is a pretty well-worn primitive trail. I think some of the classes, or maybe just students with their free time, go from the school down to the rapids, maybe potentially the rope swing. So there's a pretty well-worn trail there. But it would be downhill from the school. It wouldn't be up in the school campus proper.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Tim,
Mhm.
could you go back to the first Lux Quarry sign you put up?
Yeah, sheet 4.
I think so.
Can you see that okay?
Yes, I can. It might be the next sheet.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, it's that one. Okay. So you have mentioned that the trail, as it looks like on this illustration, sort of goes through the middle of the quarry. So that brings up two questions from me. Number one, how many active years are left for Lux to have a permit to operate that quarry?
Well, that's a good question, but I don't have the answer. I think it might be based on its zoning and not so much of a permit, but I'm happy to look into that and get some more detail.
Well, that's an important question from the standpoint of view that from quarry mining, when they were given a zoning permit to put there probably was a timeline attached to it as to the viable life of stone in that quarry, and what were they going to be doing for remediation of that quarry to bring it back to its original state before they did the quarry. If that, to me, would give you the information you need to know about whether or not how that trail has to go. So the other option could be when the zoning permit or whatever permission was granted for that quarry, were there barriers put on the edge of the quarry? In other words, do they have limits as to the perimeter of the quarry beyond which they can't quarry or mine?
Yeah, well, that's a good sequence of questions, and I'm happy to look into that, in conjunction with CDD and do some research. I do want to comment on your preface though, which is the section of the trail that goes across Luckstone's property will actually be on the very perimeter of their property, and that's an existing Greenway easement that they dedicated to the county.
Okay.
It's actually very tight up against the river through that section, and it's partly because of the topography and partly because of separation of uses and safety. But as soon as, for example, if you can see my cursor, you come downstream, cross proposed new bridge across, I believe,
Right.
Barn Branch.
Right.
And then you turn and come to the river and stay tight along the river.
Well, that's important because if they have a remediation plan in place, you don't want it to have erase your trail that you've got already there. I mean, I came out of the mining industry, so that's why I'm asking these questions, because it could be that if they granted you a permit or offered you something, a proffer or whatever was described at the time, that could be a potential source of a trail. We have to make sure that that's not sitting on top of their barrier limit, that there's an easement or a space between that barrier and the trail.
Yeah, well, that's a really astute question, and I think that's something we can look at in more detail and just factor in, as appropriate.
Okay.
Because you're right, we don't want to plan an improvement thinking it's going to be there for generations of public benefit when, in fact, it might be in conflict with some other planned use or the terms of some type of zoning or special use permit. But
I've got to believe that there was a timeline attached to the quarry. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the laws here are different than in other states, but I've got to believe that for quarrying there, they had to provide an information about what was the viable length of that quarry based on their estimates of usable stone.
yeah, well, like I said, I don't have much detail on that particular question, but we can look at that with Parks and Rec and community development and
It might
planning.
save some time. It might save some effort and surveying and so forth at the end of the day.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Well, good. Well, I'm just about to wrap up with the study, and then we can transition more to other questions that others might have. I wanted to point out that LPDA assembled some precedent images just to show how some improvements might look. These are, comparable facilities in other areas. I think there are some images of the Saunders Monticello Trail on Thomas Jefferson Foundation property. And you can see in the top left, it's an example of a crushed stone path. So that's the type of improvement that's being specified at this time. It would not be paved. It wouldn't be, 8, 10, 12 feet wide. It would be 6 feet wide of crushed stone path. That's kind of what's been specified through this feasibility study process. And there would need to be multiple different bridges, and there's some conceptual designs and plans shown here in terms of their elevations and the span. And just skipping ahead, you can see the bridge profiles, but also a conceptual design for the railroad underpass. Because these are critically important, engineering and planning and design details before we're in position to move forward. But it would be in total approximately 4 miles of that 6 foot wide crushed stone trail surface. There needs to be 7 bridges. We would be working on a signage plan and kiosks and ways to have interpretation and education resources. As I alluded to, there would need to be some separation of uses, potentially including fences or other railings in the vicinity of Jefferson Mills ruins. I mentioned those specific improvements at Luckstone for safety purposes. And then we talked about the Rivanna Blueway facilities and expansions and improvements that are possible. So in terms of next steps, I would imagine I'm predicting that somebody's got a question about project timeline. I just want to say that, we're not measuring this in terms of months, we're measuring this in terms of years at this point. But there are factors coming together that's making this more feasible. Some momentum is building. But next steps generally include additional coordination with the VDOT and the Federal Highway Administration to make sure that passing underneath I-64 is permissible and making any improvements that they would identify. We need to, as I said, work with Buckingham Branch and CSX on the railroad underpass approvals. We're going to continue working with Liz and others at Thomas Jefferson Foundation on easement acquisitions and the nature and the terms of how the Greenway can be successful through that corridor. We need to work with Luckstone on some of those safety details. Coordination with public schools is important for Stone Robinson's property. And finally, the Clifton, to understand what the potential opportunities might be at that riverfront property in terms of expanded Blueway facilities, and new trailhead, et cetera. And of course, there's all the steps that come with securing project funding and completing project construction. So again, I think we're going to be able to enjoy this together in the years ahead, but we'll be working and continue to be working on this month after month. So with all of that in mind, happy to try to answer any questions, additional questions that you all might have, or just engage in discussion.
Yes, Tim, I'd like to ask a question regarding the Buckingham, the railroad. Are you planning on actually basically tunneling through there for a path, or asking them to redo their pylons or something?
Very important question, Supervisor Lupisto Kirtley. So it's actually a railroad bridge in that location. And the underpass won't need to be bored through any earth or any tunneling. It'll just be a matter of building a freestanding structure with a roof to ensure safe passage underneath the active railroad line going over that bridge.
Okay. So basically where you would walk under it, you want something above people's heads as they walk basically around it. Okay.
Right under it.
Yep, no problem. That would be fine. Okay. Because the railroads are not easy to deal with. Pardon me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Tim, you said something about mobility concerns. I couldn't quite hear what you said. So how much of the path proposed improvements would be ADA accessible?
That's a great question, Ida Lee. That hasn't been, there isn't a specified section that would be fully ADA compliant. We do take mobility issues into consideration and take those very seriously. This is not necessarily a trail that we can construct with ADA level accessibility from start to finish. And there's really not a whole lot of length of this section or the Old Mills Trail in general that is conducive for like full mobility. The exceptions would be closer to Dardentow Park, where you can park in the river access parking lot and continue on that paved trail for a ways. But this, would not be a fully ADA accessible Greenway trail.
Yeah, okay.
I think what I mentioned was the fact that in some sections, this will be one 6-foot wide trail. And then the feasibility study shows opportunities where there might be that 6-foot wide trail plus a narrower earthen surface trail to allow some users to jump off the main trail, do something a little bit more perhaps difficult, or just an alternate complement to the main trail. So bikers, trail runners, folks who might be moving more rapidly than just somebody out for a walk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tim, question. Along the trail, where do you have projected accessibility areas, and do those also include parking for people to then walk down and access the trail?
Yeah, great questions, Cal. Thank you. I think, the main thing that's been a part of the county's formally adopted plans is what's called the Eastern Trailhead Park. That would be in a corner of the Peter Jefferson Place development, sort of below the hospital.
Mhm.
The Future Parks and Green Systems Plan does identify the Eastern Trailhead Park in that general vicinity. And so that would be something providing vehicular access, and ideally including some ADA accessible pathways and trails to experience some section of the riverfront. I think if there's going to be a trailhead at Milton, it would be great to include at least some features that are fully ADA compliant and accessible. Outside of those two future opportunities, I don't think we've got anything else specified.
Thank you very much, Tim.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one very general question that goes back to the very beginning of your talk, Tim. So what exactly does the scenic river designation mean? What does it indicate?
That's a good question. I think there's a way of promoting rivers, both for their stewardship and conservation, and maybe also tourism and like ecotourism. But I will say, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it's not a restrictive, it doesn't preclude people's private property rights through such a designation. It's more of like a celebration and an honorific designation for the purposes I mentioned a moment ago.
Thank you.
But I think it's pretty cool. It's the very first river designated in the Commonwealth as a state scenic river. So there you go.
It may make it available for federal funds for the Wild and Scenic River program too.
That's a good point. I'd like to study that a little bit more.
Yeah, I would imagine there's grant opportunity within, or it elevates a score of a grant.
Cameron, do you know anything additional based on your work on the Pantops master plan or Rivanna River corridor plan?
Yeah, I know a little bit. So the scenic river designation is actually a designation that gets awarded by the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. And there's a lot of criteria that gets evaluated when they look at any river that could potentially be designated as a scenic river. And they have a website that I can send a link to all the CAC members. It actually has some good questions and answers about what the designation does and doesn't do. You can actually see maps of all the other rivers in the state that are designated as scenic rivers, but it does say that one thing is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission recognizes Virginia's state scenic river system. And sometimes that can lead to certain funding going toward a locality or even the state if they need to do certain things to preserve that river. And there's a bunch of stuff on this list, but as Tim said, it doesn't impose any restrictions on land use on private properties that are adjacent to the river. So that's just one thing to keep in mind about it.
Is any new news on the pedestrian bridge?
No, not in conjunction with this presentation. I believe like a regional coalition is still working on that in terms of advancing it to the smart scale application for the future rounds. I believe the TJPDC is going to apply for funding for that project in the next available smart scale round, which might not be two years from now, or maybe 1 year from now.
I think it's 1 year from now, but yeah, Tim, you're correct. The TJPDC is actually serving as the lead on that project to assist both the county and the city. Since there's some potential alignments that we've looked at to where that bridge could actually be constructed, and a couple of them would have the bridge landing on one side in the county and on the other side in the city. I believe there was one alignment where the bridge would actually be entirely within the county, so it would connect to Pantops and then the Woolen Mills area. But nevertheless, it would be a smart scale project that gets applied to during the next round of applications that VDOT is accepting. And I believe that is next summer.
Well, thank you very much. Tim?
Question for Cameron. What can we do to apply for any kind of federal funds that might be available for the Rivanna River project? Without giving you more work.
There's a lot of answers to that question. I mean, I think with the river being designated as a scenic river, it is eligible to receive certain grants if, you know, there's a nonprofit or a federal program that does award grants to those types of rivers. And I think the project, you know, it would be something that probably both community development and Parks and Rec would have to look at together to identify those sources that we could apply to. But I mean, basically it comes down to making applications.
So does it have to be our staff that makes the application, or could we get assistance for staff from other community members that might have some experience or would like to do that?
I think if staff were to do it, it would be something that the board would have to take and put onto a departmental work plan.
Yeah. What about outside assistance? I mean, we have a lot of really smart people in our community. And, you know, maybe some may be willing to look at this, explore this, go in depth, you know, and give the information to the county. Maybe not write up the whole thing, but certainly do a lot of the legwork. Would that help?
That would definitely be something that's helpful. I don't want to step on Tim's toes on any of that, but Tim, I don't know if your department has used just members of the public before to assist with those types of things.
Yeah, there's definitely different state and federal programs, and a lot of the state programs are funded with federal dollars, but yeah, we're kind of building our capacity for grant writing as a staff. I know the county has gotten a lot of new procedures and protocols in place to kind of make grant writing a little more efficient and effective. So yeah, as Cameron alluded to, if we do identify a federal funding source that's worth pursuing, we'd be working across our two departments, working with Department of Finance and Budget, and others, honestly, facilities and environmental services, and just coming up with the best approach that we can. Anytime there's a chance to work with local nonprofit organizations or other members of the public to, you know, strengthen those types of pursuits, yeah, absolutely. That'd be a great idea.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on to the balance of the agenda, but thank you, Tim, very much, and Liz, thank you very much for an excellent session, presentation, explanation, the graphics, the whole package.
Yeah,
Good
you're
luck
very
to you.
welcome.
It
Thanks
sounds
for
like a
having us.
very ambitious project.
It is, but stay tuned and yeah, looking forward to making it a reality.
Oh, great.
Thanks a
Okay.
lot.
Excuse me. Community development, Carmen Langell.
Thanks, Dick. All right, everybody. So I'm going to give our monthly update on the status of different development projects that are going on within Pantops. To start, I'll talk about, I don't know if anyone has driven by or gone through the interchange recently at I-64 and 250, but within the past week, you've probably noticed that they are actually starting to do some grading work on the off-ramp if you're coming on I-64 West and then getting onto 250 and heading into Pantops. Previously, they were just doing some grading work on the on-ramp to get on I-64 East, but they've actually gone over to the other side now, and that grading work has begun. As it stands, that project is still on track to be completed at the original date of March 2023 that VDOT told us about when they approved the smart scale application. So just continue to be aware that project is ongoing. For private land development projects, I'm going to start an update. I had mentioned at our previous meetings that we have a site plan amendment under review at the Pantops Shopping Center. And that site plan is proposing a 1,000 square foot, it's pretty small, building at the back corner of the site near where that gazebo is currently located. There's a flat green grassed area there that they're going to install some new parking into. And then the new building is actually going to be a drive-through car wash. To give you an idea of the scale, that other car wash that's at the corner of 250 and Riverbend Drive, that building is about 3,500 square feet. So this will be a very small operation. Nevertheless, the plan's still under review. Next up is the old Malloy Ford site on 250. I'm sure you all noticed that they did some demolition work to the front facade of the main building there. What they're doing is they're trying to build the facade back because they're looking to get some new auto dealerships to go back to that site. They had a site plan amendment under review with staff that was going to resurface a lot of that existing parking because it's starting to get a little bit worn down. And that was approved about 5 weeks ago. So you may see some site work going on in the near future, as well as the construction of that new facade at the front of the building. Next up is the Hampton Inn project that is along State Farm Boulevard. That site plan is still under review with staff, but it is nearing approval. They just need to get some easements recorded and then update the site plan to reflect some legal information. I expect that will probably be approved within the next 2 to 4 months, just depending on how fast the applicant moves with getting all that taken care of. But it is nearing the end. If you all recall, back in January, we had a community meeting for a zoning map amendment project, which is called the Overlook Hotel. And that's the hotel that's along 250, right next to the Rivanna Ridge Shopping Center and the SunTrust building. So that project has gone through 2 reviews with staff, and we sent our last round of review comments on May 7th. And the applicant has told us that they want to continue going through reviews with staff until our comments have gotten to a point where the applicant feels comfortable moving forward to a public hearing with the Planning Commission. So as it stands now, they're going to resubmit for another review with staff before they make that request to schedule a public hearing. I'll continue to monitor that and keep you all posted for when they do actually make that request and that public hearing gets scheduled in case you're interested in going and attending that. And then looks like the last project I have is the townhomes that are on the site that's next to Overlook. So there had been a site plan under review about 2 years ago that was proposing to build 130 apartments. And that project ended up getting withdrawn. And there's a new developer that's looking at building 40 townhomes on that site. And so the initial site plan for that project is still under review with staff. It has not been approved yet. We had some changes that they needed to make before we could approve the initial, but they do intend to resubmit to address those comments and hopefully get approval from staff for the initial site plan. Then they would have to still go and do a final site plan before that project could begin construction. So there's still quite a few steps left, but nothing's really changed since last month on that one. And so it looks like that is the end of this. Sorry. So you can,
Cameron, a question. Yesterday, driving by there, it looked to me as if site clearing had started to begin with that area. Was that my age or what?
Cal, you were cutting out a little bit, but I think you were asking about some of the clearing that they're doing on that site.
Yes, sir. That's exactly it.
Yeah, so we noticed that as well, we meaning county staff. The answer to that is we have not approved anything to allow them to go up there and do that. They actually constructed that little driveway right off South Pantops Drive.
Yes, sir.
And so VDOT right now, that they needed a permit from VDOT to do that, and they did not obtain one. So it's my understanding that VDOT inspectors are going out there. If they haven't gone out already, they'll be going out within the next week or so. And that work needs to stop until that permit gets awarded. Yeah, there was nothing approved to allow that. So sometimes that happens. And
Thank you very much.
Where is this again, Cameron?
this is the property that it's currently undeveloped, and it's located right next to the Overlook condominiums on South Pantops Drive. It's on the south side of it. So if you're looking at Overlook, it's to the right.
The driveway that they put in, is that something that they initially or will be asking for?
Yeah, so that would be something that they would show on a water protection ordinance plan, which is the plan that the county reviews and approves for any site grading and then erosion and control measures that are needed for them when they're doing construction. They do have a WPO plan under review, but that hasn't been approved yet. So I don't know if it was a situation where a contractor was getting a little bit anxious and wanted to go out there and start doing stuff, but that's where it stands.
Can we make them put it back?
Potentially, if VDOT deems that necessary, then that's what they would need to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Ron, you have a question?
Yeah, two questions, Cameron. Do you know anything about the Burger King in near Food Lion?
No, as far as I know, we haven't received any sort of applications for a new business to go into that existing structure, and nor have we received a demolition permit application. I believe what they're trying to do is market it potentially to another restaurant just to see if someone would be willing to occupy that existing building. That said, you know, if they do have a user that is a different kind of business that wanted to redevelop that site, they would just come in with a new site plan for that parcel in particular. But as of now, we haven't received any redevelopment proposals for it.
Okay.
Cameron, have you not heard that it's going to be it's one of the donut places, maybe a Dunkin' Donuts or?
I have
you
not heard that.
You have not? Okay. I mean, I've heard it. I don't know where I heard it, but I heard it.
Yeah, I also heard it's gonna be a chicken restaurant, but you know.
Interesting. Well, I do know, I mean, you all probably known this, and I haven't bothered to mention it just because they didn't really need any site plans for it. But the old Hardee's restaurant, that's another out parcel at the shopping center, they closed down at the beginning of the pandemic. And Toby's Pawn Shop has gone in and occupied that space. They just did some work inside of the building, but didn't really change anything else on site. So that could be, I mean, that could be the same thing that happens with the Burger King. It might not be a restaurant that goes in. It would just need to be a use that complies with the zoning district there.
Cameron, speaking, oh, I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead.
All right, that's it. I saw a sign permit for an oil change, and I assume that's for the existing oil change place in Pantops Shopping Center. When I first saw it, I thought it was some new oil change place, but I assume it's for that one.
You mean the Jiffy Lube?
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, I saw a sign application for it. It looks like another name. Maybe there's another owner coming in.
I don't know anything off the top of my head about that, but I can look into that and see if there is, you know, a new oil change company going into that site.
So Cameron, the question I had was regarding Toby's and the, what is that, a half track that's out in front? Is that something that they needed a permit, and did they get one?
That is not something that they needed to get a permit for in terms of signage, but you know, that is, it could be another situation where if it's an inoperable vehicle, there
Right.
might be an issue there. So you can send me an email if you want to follow up on that, and we can.
I will, because usually for a sign, you have to get a permit for a sign. So the fact that they parked this large inoperable truck.
Yeah.
eh,
And it's been there a while.
I know. Yeah. It's butt ugly, but anyway, I didn't say that.
Yeah.
Cameron, I have a question on the old Malloy Ford property. Way up at the top on the hill that overlooks the Wawa, that there's a sign says open for business. What is that?
So my understanding, there's a smaller building at the back of the site. It's like a square shaped building, and it used to be part of where Malloy Ford would have some of their service vehicles like stationed back there. And it would also be a staging place if you had to drop your vehicle off to get repairs done. And from what I know, they have a sign up that says Flow Automotive. And so I think that is another repair use there. I assume the property owner is leasing out that space and not selling off portions of the property, because where that building is located, it's almost half of the entire Malloy Ford site. So they may have worked out an arrangement with Flow to use that building for whatever use they do.
I say it's open for business. That's what I noticed the other day.
I've seen some cars parked up there recently too. It seems like in the past 2 weeks, there's been more that have been parked out front, but it is a permitted use, whatever it is, it's associated with the automotive highway commercial zoning district that applies to that property. So.
Okay.
So
Any other
Cameron,
questions?
excuse me.
Go ahead, Eileen.
Thank you. Cameron, at the last meeting, you were talking about the traffic flow for Wawa. And I wanted to ask about, is there any update on what's happening now that Wawa is fully opening? I don't know if other people are experiencing what I've seen several times, and that is that as traffic crosses Free Bridge going east, there's now a line that can be 5 or 6 vehicles long that inches into that incredibly busy intersection, trying to turn left into Wawa. At the same time, occasionally there are cars coming directly across 250, also trying to turn left and go east. So I've seen several near accidents as people try to navigate that. And I was wondering if anybody is monitoring this situation.
Yeah, so that was part of VDOT's approval for the entire development of that Wawa and hotel area. They had to, as I'm sure you've seen, build what we call a right in, right out concrete barrier at that entrance on 250. And that's supposed to prevent people from trying to make a left-hand turn off of 250 into the Wawa site. And I've seen it myself. It seems like people move up a little bit so they can try and make a wider turn and then get into that right turn lane that lets you go into the site. We are aware of it. I've actually brought it up with our transportation planners. Ultimately, it will come down to VDOT probably having to install either new signage or potentially those plastic bollard barriers that you see, like if you're coming from the city and making a right onto Freebridge. But yeah, people are not supposed to be making that left-hand turn. So sadly, I guess the pork chop didn't extend long enough to prevent that from being done, but that's something that we're aware of and we're looking into what we can do about it.
And Cameron, also in Ida Lee, won't that be alleviated once they VDOT fixes the road from Vulcan all the way down to River 20?
That is true.
They're eliminating the suicide lane, Ida Lee.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
We've gotten that smart scale funding awarded. So there will be a concrete median
Right.
along the full length all the way up to Rolkin eventually. That's probably going to take a few years to get built. So, I mean, it makes sense for something to be done in the interim,
Yes.
if possible.
Yep.
And speaking of VDOT, what are they called rumble strips just past Peter Jefferson Parkway on 250 as you go east? Is that simply to slow down traffic as you approach the construction?
Yes, those will be removed eventually once the diverging diamond is fully built. But those were installed as a precautionary measure to try and make sure drivers slow down as they approach the construction site. Previously, basically that whole stretch was a 45-mile-an-hour zone. And I'm sure you've seen that there's different speed limit signs posted on 250 west of there that slow you down to 35, and then actually going under the overpass, it's down to 25 miles an hour. So VDOT just put that in as an extra measure to try and have vehicles move slower while that construction is ongoing.
In the meantime, Cameron, are we having an update tonight on Freebridge Road? From
We're
anybody?
not having an update on that tonight. We spoke a little bit about that at last month's meeting, and I can send you a link to the recording. We have a video that we take of all these CAC meetings now. But last month, Tim came out and talked about just some ongoing efforts we're looking at for the whole Rivanna corridor. And some of that did encompass what's eventually looked at happening to Freebridge Lane under the master plan. Right now, we haven't funded the conversion of Freebridge Lane into the one-way Green Street that the master plan calls for. But nevertheless, that is an implementation project that could be undertaken in the future. The board would just need to set aside funding as part of the capital improvement plan.
Have we funded speed bumps?
On Freebridge Lane?
Yes.
Not at this time.
I'm fielding every day at least 4 to half a dozen complaints and requests from people who are walking or jogging on Freebridge Lane that they are very, very concerned about the speeding on that road, and it seems to have intensified within about the last month. I don't know how we can accelerate attention of VDOT to that road. I don't know what the answer is, but I put one please slow down sign, and I have 3 more that I'd like to put down the remainder of the road. People are getting very, very nervous, and I just don't want it to fall off the radar of VDOT or the county or whoever is in charge of it.
Right. I will answer that. Sarah has not fallen off the radar. I'm in contact with VDOT. Nothing happens quickly, unfortunately. But I think the quickest thing is if we can get some of those, the strips, not the speed humps, but speed bumps. So if we can at least get that temporary measure, but as far as getting the street one way, that's going to take a while. It has to go through the process. But no, I'll check again with Carrie Shepherd to see what can be done. Or do you have any other contacts, Cameron, for that?
No, that would be a good place to start. And
Okay. All right. And then also, I think the people need to stay on. There is a trail, there is a walkway that is not near the road, but there is one small section near that one guy's house where you have to go on the road.
That's right.
So yeah, that is that's problematic. And I wish Tim was here because I'm wondering if there's just some way to go from the from that walkway through the parking lot up around into Darden House, so you don't have to actually go on the street.
Well, the
Right.
biggest problem is too that the Parks and Recs have two paths that converge past Riverside Village, be it to the and the people coming on that Parks and Rec trail have to cross Free Bridge Lane to get on the trail, and that's the big concern. Is because two access points of the trail have to actually go across. They converge to one. And have to go across Free Bridge Lane. And that's the scary part.
Yeah, yeah, I know people have to be extremely careful crossing there. You're absolutely right, right. So let me see.
This is Mike Spatz. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
I just want to go backwards just a little bit. We have the same pork chop problem at the Wawa at 29 North and Prophet Road. And it's a mess once they put a pork chop in. So our experience is it doesn't matter how much signage you put up, you've got to put a physical barrier. People are driving over the top of the pork chop to be able to make a left-hand turn. So it's just the way people are, you know? So you have to, you know, make sure you physically damage their vehicles or have some sort of a barrier up. It just signage doesn't work, just letting you know. On South Pantops Road, on the side where Martha Jefferson is and the new apartments that are going in, we're wondering about the speed limit and crosswalks on Pantops. The speed limit on that road right now is 35, which really means 55. People use it as a slalom course racetrack, and I'm wondering what help we can get to maybe get a slower speed limit there or something to slow that traffic down. And if we're going to be planning a crosswalk from those new townhomes, maybe over to the Martha Jefferson walking trail or something, but we've got quite a bit of a problem with pedestrians right now, dodging traffic between trying to get across that road. Just wondering, Cameron, what our steps would be.
Could you explain which road again?
It's the South Pantops Road that leads from like State Farm, State Farm, the old unoccupied State Farm,
right,
and goes down to 64. It's a fairly new, meaning in 2011, that's when it was developed.
So there's a crosswalk between there and the other side of 29. Is that what you're saying?
There's a crosswalk from there that leads between the Peter Jefferson Place buildings and our outpatient care center. And then there's another crosswalk down closer, I'm going to say like by the Hilton Garden area and that last Peter Jefferson building. And that one's actually off the trail at the very bottom that has a crosswalk going across that divided highway. And both of those are pretty dangerous crosswalks. Even if we had some crosswalk, flashing lights and, like the city does, even maybe getting someone to install those to try to slow down the traffic or even stop it when there's somebody in the crosswalk. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you're talking about an existing crosswalk.
Yeah, there's two existing ones.
Okay.
I'm wondering about if they're going to have a third one that leads from those townhomes that go down to the river, and cross right there over into the Martha Jefferson. I don't know if there's going to be a third one.
Right.
But there's two existing ones now.
Right.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, the project there, it's called the Presidio Apartments.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the approved site plan right now, and there is a crosswalk across Peter Jefferson Parkway that's proposed at the entrance to those apartments. It looks like it's going to be 6 feet wide, maybe even 8 feet. VDOT has approved that and says it will be constructed to the VDOT standards for that. So normally the paint for that, it can be white, but it can also be a sort of silver reflective color, which I believe all new crosswalks on public roads are using that kind of paint. So in that case, it may serve as a warning to cars, hey, slow down, there's potential crossings here of pedestrians. But in terms of getting the speed limit lower, that would be something you'd have to contact VDOT about. I know that they get a lot of requests to reduce speed limits on certain roads, and there's a very stringent process that they go through with evaluating whether that's appropriate or not, just based on the types of uses that are there and how wide the road was designed to and what, you know, traffic capacity it was designed to whenever it was built. I haven't seen a lot of roads actually get their speed limits reduced, but you can reach out to them and see if they will come out and evaluate that and potentially drop
Yeah,
that
you know,
speed.
if people would drive the speed limit, I think it'd be okay. We've actually contacted the PD and they've done quite a bit of, you know, quite a bit of traffic stuff. But I was wondering, can we investigate with them as a committee some electronic crosswalk alerts, such as push this button, some light starts flashing, and then the cars are actually, you know, flashing light, and the cars are actually required to stop. I know that I was told by VDOT at one point, the city put them in the road, which really work really well. They got the lights that turn on and they flash all the way across the road. They said, well, that they did that without our approval. I go, oh, okay, well, they're everywhere in the city. But I'm just wondering if we could ask them as a group for some crosswalk electronic warning systems. That's what I'm, and that may take care of it also. It may just inherently slow people down when they're flashing.
Yeah, but I don't know whether or not VDOT would approve that. And the reason why I say that, because those roads going behind Martha Jefferson are pretty wide. A lot of the roads where they have the flashing signals in Charlottesville are either in front of UVA, going to the corner, or they're in front of schools, things like that. So I'm not sure, but as you're speaking, I'm wondering whether or not maybe, here I go again, but not a speed bump, but maybe a speed hump. Sometimes if you put a speed hump in front of a crosswalk or actually on the crosswalk, you know, the speed hump, that's where you cross. Sometimes that works. And that's something I could also check with VDOT on. If Cameron, if you know the exact location of where Mr. Spatz is talking about, then I can actually ask VDOT if they would consider putting in a raised crosswalk, frankly.
Yeah, you can send me an email and I can send you the location.
Okay, another email.
Also, Cameron, I guess maybe note where those other two existing crosswalks are. They're from
Yes.
595 to Martha Jefferson Drive to Peter Jefferson. And then where the trail actually, the Rivanna Trail crosses down lower towards 250. There's an actual crosswalk there. Thank you, everyone. Good luck with the Pantops pork chop. Oh my goodness.
Well, you know, when he's mentioned that about the pork chop, why can't we put bollards on top of the pork chop, which is also a visual tall barrier?
I mean, the answer to that is it's possible to put them there. I think VDOT's, again, their current design manual doesn't call for that to be a regular feature to be on pork chops unless there's some, you know, extenuating circumstances at a particular
But if they can get around it, I'm telling you, if you don't put it all the way down like Cameron says, you put those ones on, if they can get around it, people will. I mean, they'll just go past that Ballard pork chop and they'll take like a U-turn left.
Yeah.
I've seen it out at 29 North. I mean, sat there an hour and saw like 15 cars do it. I mean, they just don't care. So, I mean, you really got to make a real deterrent as far as you can. So it's just almost physically impossible to make the left if that's what you want.
Maybe we can have Wawa pay for it. The bollards in the middle of the street.
Well, there you go.
Okay, moving on. Or Cal, did you want to say something? Okay. B, you're up with liaison.
I think I've been talking enough. in regard to what Michael said, I've been working with VDOT because we have a stretch of road 22 to Gordonsville. So 22 to Sismont is 45 miles an hour. From Sismont to Gordonsville is 50 miles an hour. So basically it's one long stretch of road. In the middle of it, they changed the speed limit. I've been working with VDOT and they haven't completed their final study, but it doesn't look like they're going to change the speed limit to make it all 45. So that's very frustrating. But you know, that's how it works, I guess, but very frustrating. So I'm just giving that information to let you know it's, yeah, it's, you try and try, but doesn't work. But on the good news, I may need you all to help write letters, and I'll tell you why, because part of our legislative agenda that I asked to be put on for the meeting in July 7th, we let the assembly know what our legislative priorities are. One of the things I'm asking for are speed cameras in the rural areas, because you have these long stretches of road that the only way to reduce traffic or get speeders is to have law enforcement out there. So they either park, you know, 2-lane road, they park in someone's driveway, they catch someone. If they do stop them, there's no place to pull them over. So you get a miles-long backup. So one of the things I'm interested in getting would be speed cameras, which, you know, you have a sign letting people know, hey, along this stretch of the road are speed cameras. Takes a picture of the car, the license plate, you get a ticket in the mail, you either pay it or you go to court to contest it. They're using this in Montgomery County in Maryland, and they're using it in DC. And so it wouldn't be for everywhere, but in some areas where it makes no sense to have a police car, which takes up time, officers' time, to be able to ticket people. And really there's no way to ticket anyone because there's no way to pull them over. And I'm talking about large trucks, speeder, cars, everything. So if that does go through, then I would probably say maybe as a committee, we could also send a letter to our legislators. And I am actually working on trying to get a bipartisan bill through. Wish me luck. Trying to think any, other than that, yeah, traffic is always a big, huge concern. And that's something I continue to work on, so. And I'm appreciative of all your input because it's important. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Bea. Corey, do you have anything for us tonight from the Planning Commission?
Good afternoon. I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Any old business? I think we've covered some while we've been going through anyway, so. Okay, new business. We've already talked about the need for additional members. I didn't realize that there was an election requirement. Is that to start in July? Is that what the indication is?
So usually there is an annual election of officers. We did the last election at our August meeting in 2020. So I think that given the amount of people that have their membership expiring, when we meet next in August, we'll probably need to hold an election. I know LJ's term is expiring, so we'll at least need someone to be a new secretary. And I think we actually have 2 co-chairs right now. So yeah, that's Cal saying. So depending on who's still left, we may need to fill some of those officer vacancies.
Okay. I have a couple of announcements. One is that, and maybe many of you know this, Cameron has been promoted to senior planner. Congratulations. And as a result, he's going to step away for some period of time. he's been a great resource to me and to all of you, directly and indirectly, with our monthly meetings. And I wish you good luck and look forward to you returning at some point. But in the meantime, we'll have, where I wrote it down, Rachel Falkenstein will be substituting for Cameron. So,
Thank you, Dick.
okay.
And I just want to say thank you to everyone on the CAC. I realize I probably need to update my Zoom name because it still has senior planner. I got my new title is principal planner, and part of my role over the next few months, we're actually finally getting some staff members back. We had some positions frozen because of COVID, and we had those positions unfrozen about 6 weeks ago. And so we're filling some of those positions, and we've got some new folks starting in the next couple weeks. And I'm going to be responsible for training them on doing things like plan review, public speaking, so on and so forth. So Rachel is going to be taking over probably till at least September, maybe October. But I think most of you know Rachel. She worked on the master plan with us. She's actually in charge of supervising all the CACs, and she's a great neighborhood planner. So I expect everything to go off without a hitch. And before you know it, I'll be back.
Well, good. You're a great resource to all of us in whatever you do. The next
Thank
thing is that in consult with V and Cameron, and I am recommending that we do not have the July meeting. It does not seem that we have sufficient additional material to talk about. Unless there are serious complaints, I think we'll make that a motion. I don't have to make an emotion. I'll just make a decision that they will see you in August.
On that same note, Dick, I vote that we continue these virtual meetings. I think this is, I don't know if we're ever going to want to go back to live, but these seem to work pretty good.
Well, that was my next question. Is that a decision to be made by the county, or do we get to make that?
Well, unfortunately, I can answer that one. Unfortunately, Governor Northam has declared the emergency over as of the end of June. We are allowed to continue for an additional 6 months after the emergency is declared over. However, July 1, there's a new law that says we can continue for 1 year after the emergency is declared over. So which one we fall into, I don't know yet, because the Board of Supervisors meetings is the same thing. Maybe that gives us enough time to say, well, can we at least have the community advisory committees and some other committee meetings be held virtually? So we have to work through that, but as of right now, probably another 6 months at least, it looks like will be virtual, which I think everyone agrees to.
Okay, well, very good.
And if one other thing, I want to make sure I don't forget anything for Cameron, because he told me to remind him. We're talking about the sign in front of Toby's and the truck, and then also the raised sidewalk, crosswalk in the Martha Jefferson area, or flashing signs. Was that what I was supposed to remind you of? Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, observations, or whatever? If not, Cal, were you trying to say something, or you got to unmute?
Unmute. The only question I have as to not having a meeting in January, is that a problem because we have to have the annual meeting and election of officers? It's a question.
No, it's not a problem. I mean, usually the way it works is July meetings are when the CACs hold their elections for the new officers. So we did that in August last year because we canceled the last July meeting. So the year-long term for the officers goes through August of this year. All the other CACs are in the same boat because I think every CAC is actually canceling their July meetings. So there's no legal issues or anything like that with waiting. To do
Very
it.
good. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll see you the fourth Monday in August. Have a good
And
summer.
good luck, Cameron. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Congratulations,
Carol.
Cameron.
Yeah, Olivia, would you
Thank
stay
you,
on?
Natalie.
You
You
I'm
stay
sorry.
on, Olivia, just for a second? While
Cool.
everyone cancels off?